Welcome to the Nurture Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Denise Cagan, president of the DCA Virtual Business Support. At DCA, we believe in small businesses and the families they support. Learn more at dcavirtual.com. Culture, from the Latin word cultura, stemming from colere, means to cultivate. It generally refers to patterns of human activity that imbue significance and importance. Gustavo Razzetti is the CEO and founder of Fearless Culture, a culture design consultancy that inspires teams to do their best work. Welcome to the show, Gustavo.
Hello there. Great to be here. Very excited about the conversation, and I love the opening. So my mind is already moving to different directions. So
Absolutely. And for our listeners, so we don't script our conversation.
Yeah, I can tell.
Yes, my guests never know exactly what I'm going to say, though I don't try to surprise them. That's not the intention whatsoever. Gustavo, you were invited onto the show because of what you do. Culture is a big buzzword these days, especially when it refers to workplace culture. So I read a definition of culture, which is probably broader than workplace, but tell me what your definition of culture is.
That's great. I'm going to start with your definition, the idea of cultivate, because I think that culture is something that you cannot impose. There's a balance between defining certain parameters and then let it grow organically. So the point is, some people think that they can control it, which they can't, and some people think, oh, let it grow on their own. There's a little bit of both. There's a little bit of intentionality and a little bit of organic growth. Tony Hsieh, who was the founder and CEO of Zappos, used to talk about his role as CEO as a gardener. And I think that's a good way to get into culture, because he said, I need to set the right environment. I need to make sure the soil is fertile and bring the right seeds. But then I need to step back and let those seeds find their path and grow in the right direction. So I think that that's the point of culture. Create a place in which people can grow. Mm-hmm. You create the conditions, but then as a leader, more step back and let them do their job.
I actually chuckled because in my mind, that was exactly what I was envisioning is a garden, it's very similar to a garden. So building a culture is intentional. However, there are organic pieces of it too. So first of all, what is the first step a company should do? I'm guessing it is probably define what culture they want. Is that how it would work? I might be stepping out of bounds here, and that's okay. You can course correct.
No, you're good. But I would say there's a previous step to that, because, Perfect. We need to design and define the culture we want. They call it the future state, ideal culture, the culture we all desire or aspire to have. However, like Strategy 101, before we get into that, we need to understand where we are. So what's our current culture? We need to codify it. Even if sometimes small businesses or also in startups say, hey, we never done any culture work, so we don't have a culture. I always say the moment you have 3 people or 2 people collaborating, there's already a culture in place. There are explicit norms and rules. There are behaviors that are good and are not. There are emotions in place. So that's part of the culture. So understanding your culture is a critical first step. So don't jump into designing before knowing where you are. I need to know what's working and what's not working. I always say, like, we're going to continue working on analogies and metaphors here. If you have a house, that you buy a house that needs a lot of work, basically you want to recycle it and you want to rebuild it, the first thing you need to understand, bring an engineer to say, hey, is the foundation okay? Are the walls going to stand? Are the windows in good condition? Should I replace them? What are the things that, from a functional standpoint, that are working or not? And then you can jump into first take care of those and next design the more nice looking designy kind of things, like the colors, maybe change the kitchen, those stuff. But the foundation of a culture is the starting point, and that's kind of the way we do it.
Okay, so give me a couple of examples of maybe clients that you've worked with, what their culture was to them. If you can maybe correlate it to an industry, clearly not the client, because I want our listeners to understand how cultures can differ, that they're not all the same.
Absolutely. The cultures are all different. And unfortunately, we cannot name clients because of confidentiality agreement, but we can give examples and industries. So One thing we do is try to understand the type of culture you have first, no? The categories. And therefore, like groups, there are tribal companies, company cultures that are more about creating a strong sense of belonging. They're cultures either that you're a strong fit or you don't fit in. No? They're very close-knit. They don't allow people that are different to be there. And the leaders of those cultures are more about creating that sense of belonging. They're very people-oriented. Their culture, they're more fearful, so everything's red tape. They're driven by fear of making mistakes, fear of crossing the line, upsetting your manager. You also have aggressive type of cultures like Netflix, for example, or Amazon. They're all about high performance, but triple A high performance. No? So if you don't deliver, you are going to lose your job. So they're going to give you a lot of freedom, but also high targets, high goals. And if you deliver, you're good. If you don't deliver even by an inch, you're out. And lastly, you have fearless cultures, which are the ones that promote innovation, idea-centric, etc. So the first thing that we do with clients try to understand what culture do you have, and is that the right type of culture you want to have. So working with a company in the healthcare industry, they believe that the culture was more innovative, that was driven by idea, etc. But when we map it, we ran a survey with all the employees across different groups. We realized that actually their culture was extremely fearful. People felt it was top down. People were afraid about making decisions. They were afraid of voicing their opinions or challenging the status quo. So that's kind of the first thing that's interesting to understand. And usually, to your point, there's a gap. So leaders tend to think of their culture in a more beautified, idealized fashion, but actually the culture is usually not so good or not close to those aspirations.
What are some simple things that business owners can do and managers can do to kind of keep their finger on the pulse of what really is happening in the culture of their workplace?
The easiest and most important thing is have conversations. There's a research that was published a couple of years ago that showed that leaders spend only 6%, a CEO, of their time talking to people. Okay, so how can you understand your culture? How can you shape your culture? How can you inspire people if you're not putting up that, you're not making that a priority? You're not putting energy and time into talking to people. So there are very things that I remember Steve Jobs, when he became the CEO at Pixar after he was ousted from Apple. He started like trying to craft a new vision for the company, talking with people. He held a lot of town halls. And one thing that he was frustrated about is that after each town hall, he asked people, hey, any feedback? And people were like, crickets. No one provided any kind of answer. So he realized he had to change the approach. So he started asking what's working at Pixar, what's not working at Pixar. So I usually use those questions with clients. They're very simple ways to start a conversation, because you're asking people to acknowledge the good within the organization, but also you're giving them permission to understand, I know everything's not perfect, I know there are issues, let's discuss them. So that duality, it's really good to start a conversation with any employee to see what's going on and start connecting the dots and see, well, there are some repetitive issues that we need to tackle.
I think that's a really good approach, because a lot of times I think team members, employees are unsure how candid and transparent they can be. And so opening them up with that warm-up question, which is, what's good in the organization? Because hopefully there's some good there too. Mm-hmm. And sometimes there's a lot more good than you imagine. That gets them, I think, feeling more comfortable giving feedback. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And building feedback requires psychological safety. Psychological safety for the audience is the same way that trust happens between two people. No, you trust me and I trust you. That's why we're having this conversation. We agree, let's work on a 30-minute show for the people to learn a little bit about culture. But then psychological safety is like collective trust. Is the feeling that your team is ready. If you're going to take the leap, they're going to hold you. They're going to be holding that safety net, so you can bring your full self to work. You can take risks. You can experiment. You can ask questions. You can share your ideas in the open without fear of retaliation. So building that psychological safety muscle, it's critical to create a culture of feedback. We have a tool, and it's a tool that's free download, so people can not only get the template to use with their teams, but also the facilitation guide. That's called Uncover the Stinky Fish. We know that teams avoid talking about issues because they magically think they're going to disappear. But hey, if you're a leader, if you're a team leader, you know that problems don't go away. They don't disappear. They actually get worse through time. So the metaphor of the stinky fish is, if you don't take care of it, it's going to start to rot, it's going to start to smell, it's going to start to become stinky, and it's going to contaminate the entire thing. So one issue is going to contaminate everything. So that tool helps you address anxieties, unknowns, what people are worried about. It also helps people address what are the issues that we cannot get over with. No, things that maybe we hired the wrong person 2 years ago and we're still blaming each other. It's also about talking about the things that everyone's talking, but not in the right place. So there are water cooler conversations. People are using the chat to talk about these things, but they're not addressing those issues with their leaders. So this tool is really effective. People love it. You can have people complete their stinky fish on their own, then pair them with someone else in the organization, exchange notes. And it's a great way to start building that psychological safety muscle.
I love that. I love the name of it too, by the way. So fast forward, we're working on culture. You've got a business that's, working to create a more inspiring culture, or the type of culture that they envision. So tell me, for our business owners out there, what are some of the benefits of doing this work? Is it just time and money we're spending?
I would say that two things. First, I'm going to start with a qualitative kind of approach, and then the quantitative. First, when it comes to culture, I always say that when you have a high functioning culture, you don't notice it. No, so you enter in a workplace and you feel that, it feels cool. People are working. You feel that the atmosphere is great. Not only camaraderie, but also the quality of the outcome. People are not extremely stressed out. There's a lot of good things happening. However, when you have a toxic or bad culture, not necessarily to the extreme of being toxic, it's really evident. You see the lack of communication. You see people sending lots of emails to cover their butts. You see a lot of people working long hours because of lack of clear priorities or priorities that change. You see people that are working on this, what now virtual presentation. So there are people that are working more than 1 hour at least per day, not because they're doing stuff, but basically to show up and say, hey, I'm working hybrid or remote, but really I'm working. So they create meetings that are unnecessary. They send Slack messages or emails that no one needs, but basically they want to pretend what's called the productivity theater. They're part of playing their part, showing that they're busy. So everyone's, we're okay. That's the bad sign. So basically you're burning out your people and they're not being productive. They're wasting everyone's time. From a quantitative standpoint, there are a lot, I cannot remember the figures now, but there's a lot of figures from 70 to 50% that shows from all the top three key consulting firms like McKinsey, etc., that shows that having a strong culture increases productivity, increases employee happiness, engagement, increases your ability to become more innovative, and also drive business performance in terms of sales growth, etc. So there's a strong correlation between having a good culture and how people feel, how owners or leaders feel, and of course, business outcome.
So one thing that you just said a little while ago about people doing Slack messages or creating appointments to, I'm assuming that you're meaning because they're trying to show productivity. And so I know a lot, we've talked a lot about metrics on this show as well. So as far as performance metrics, do you work with people when they're trying to define their culture on what performance metrics they should be measuring? Because I am a big believer in performance metrics.
Absolutely. We don't necessarily work with clients on the metrics, but we help them shift the culture for being an outcome-driven culture rather than an input-driven culture. So unfortunately, many companies set goals, OKRs, etc., but then the leaders, instead of trusting their people, say, hey, we have clear marching orders, see you in a month or in a week or whatever to see if you are doing or not. They have this perception that their role is about controlling people. So they want to be on top of people. So people are not going to deliver because they have their boss on their neck, like a breathing and controlling. So that's a key a shift. I think that talks about the lack of trust. So people, when you work towards performance metrics and success and productivity metrics, basically you agree with your team what needs to happen, and then you let them do their job. That's how a high-performing culture operates. When there's lack of trust, people feel either my people are not going to work, they're not going to deliver, so they are over-controlling their team members.
And there's got to be some type of shift in guidance between basically the micromanaging and what you're saying, that, the boss over their neck and getting to the point of that. So talk about the steps and the progression there that you take teams through.
Absolutely. I think there's a connection between what the culture rewards and the leader per se. So there are leaders that by definition or training or because of their personality, they're control freaks. It's something interesting that research shows that very few leaders think that they are micromanagers, right? And then there's over 70% of people, employees, that say that at some point, at least one of their leaders were micromanaging them. So you cannot have it both. There's some kind of contradiction, and I trust people more than leaders because there's a lot of research that shows that leaders are not self-aware. No, close to 4% of all CEOs are only self-aware. That's a very tiny percentage. So they cannot be clear on what's going on. The other thing that's important is we need to work on the culture and the leader. So sometimes the culture itself rewards that kind of control. So it's if my boss controls me, I control the other person and that kind of stuff. We always work with clients into defining what are the behaviors that we reward and punish and making those explicit, because in the end, your culture is not just your purpose, your values, how you want to feel and collaborate, but in the end, the behaviors, it's the most important piece of your culture. If you don't align those behaviors, those values, then your culture goes south. So when it comes to behavior, some companies reward the wrong things. So we were working with a client in a financial industry, and we realized that they were rewarding low performers because leaders were giving those people a pass. They weren't delivering and no one did anything about it. But then they were punishing high performers because not only they were doing a lot of work, but they had to take over the work that the other group weren't actually completing. So those things are interesting to realize because in the end, that culture, what's driving? No, we have culture of a presentism because leaders believe that their role, it's about leading from the front rather than from the back. No, they want to be the ones. And in today's world, especially in a hybrid environment, leaders need to be, going back to the origin of our conversation, the beginning of a conversation, leaders need to create the environment and then let people do. And part of the environment, agree on the metrics, but then let people deliver.
I like that. I like that. And to clarify the example that you gave about the financial company, if I'm not mistaken, what I think I heard you say was that basically the high performers were being given more work, very likely, because the bosses, the managers knew they could do that. Whereas the low performers were, like you said, they were kind of getting a free pass, getting a lighter share of the load because they weren't performing. So if I understand correctly, the way to remedy this is either to incentivize those high performers and give them bonuses, more pay, more time off, something that says, hey, you're doing a phenomenal job, and to course correct the low performers, or maybe decide they're not the right butt in the right seat.
Absolutely, you're right. You're hired. No, yeah, okay. That's the way to do it. But talking about practical, we talk at the beginning that we want to provide actionable items for our audience, your audience. The important thing is about you need to reflect on what behaviors are you rewarding and what are you punishing, and are those the right things that you want to continue doing? Because that's important. That's where culture goes to die pretty quickly, because of inconsistency. To your point, if I'm not being rewarded and I'm going not only above and beyond, but I'm doing that twice because other people are not doing their work, then I'm going to leave and I'm going to find a job somewhere else. They're going to pay me the same or better, and I don't have to work that much. And there are people who are never going to leave the underperformers because no one does anything. So it's cool. It's accepted.
And simply being paid and paid well is not incentive to perform high.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of studies that show that people want to work in an environment that they feel appreciated, respected, that they do work that's challenging. And these are very critical. People talk a lot about engagement, and I hate the word engagement because it feels like people don't talk like that. I don't talk to your spouse, your friends. In terms of friendship, are you engaged with me? It's not a human, it's an HR term. But one thing that really drives culture, and if you want to see if your employees are happy, it's how they feel about the work they do. If people feel that the work is high quality, if the work is challenging, if they're learning, if the work is helping them improve their mastery in their particular area of expertise, that's a key signal that people are going to stay. The other thing, they can tell you, I'm happy, I love the environment, and then I'm being paid well. But if they're not excited about what they do, they're probably going to leave the company.
And I think a lot of business owners are fearful about developing their team members for those more challenging things because they are fearful they will leave. But what you just said contradicts that.
Yeah, I mean, the point is you need to keep raising the ceiling. You need to make it more challenging. You need to keep creating an environment where people live. I mean, that's what they want. So a culture in which I'm going to do new things. I'm going to be learning. I'm going to expose. Another thing that's important is many people talk about the great resignation from a paranoid kind of state of mind, like, oh, people are leaving in mass. Yeah, they are. But very few step back and say, okay, what's driving this? It's not just the economy. It's not this. There are three key elements of three key groups that are basically driving that great resignation. One is people that have realized that they want to change their careers. So it's not that I'm changing my employer and because I hate them or whatever, I want to do something different. Mm-hmm. And many organizations, that's for me, because 1/3 of people that are leaving their jobs is because of that. That's a huge signal that their employers are not understanding what people need. So instead of saying, hey, you work in finance or HR or product management, and now Denise say, you know what, I've been doing that for 10 years. Now I want to try something. The company should find for Denise a new jobs in the company because she likes the company. She's a good employee. We trust her. We know her. She knows how we deal. And that's not happening because we're not having those conversations. So what happened, Denise leaves the company and someone else hires her to do something that the company felt, oh, she's not ready. But another company, because they don't know, you say, oh, yeah, you're good. Come on, let's do it. Another group that is critical, another similar to 1/3, is leaving their jobs because they're starting their own business. Mm-hmm. In the UK and the US, we've seen in the past months an explosion of people creating their own company. So that's another thing that's happening that people are not talking about that much. And lastly, and this is dramatic, but also has to do with culture, many women are leaving the workplace because of lack of flexibility and they cannot take care of their family or integrate their personal needs with their work. And once again, culture. Is your culture being supported? Are you providing like a flexibility? For example, the other day I was reading an article about menopause and how it's affecting women. And many women are taking day offs without telling their bosses what's happening because the company is not accommodating. So there's a lot of things and a lot of low-hanging fruits that we can start. Many decades ago, unfortunately, becoming pregnant was an issue for some women. I hate that still in some workplaces it's still a problem, but many companies have stepped up and become more open and supportive. Well, now we need to do that with different areas. So there's a lot of opportunities that employers can have some quick wins for creating their workplace more receptive, more flexible, more not inclusive, but I would say more empathetic, understanding the different needs of people and helping your people thrive rather than hiding, hey, I have an issue, so I'm not going to tell my boss, I'm going to take time off.
Yeah, empathy was what came to mind. And to expound on what you say, some of those things that you just mentioned, particularly for women, they're very personal. Telling a man about menopause, he doesn't get that hot flashes affect your whole body or and it can affect your mood and your concentration, and you can't do a good job when those things are happening en masse multiple times a day. Sometimes it does get literally that bad. So that's interesting that you would mention that, because I those are some of the things I've not heard people talk a lot about with inclusivity. I know with my company, we hire mostly women because it is a flexible job. They can homeschool, take care of school. They, we don't dictate their hours. It's the measure of success is really creating, what our clients need on time and with quality. So, that's something, I'd love to see more companies take that stance, because I do know that women particularly have exited in mass on the job front, and that's impacting how employers are able to hire.
Absolutely. And I think when we talk to inclusivity, we use the term we are open-minded and we care about everyone and blah, blah, blah. But then if you really care, start thinking about the needs that are very specific and then say, what are you going to do about it? And to your point, if the conversation is difficult, don't force your employee to talk about it. Give them you have credits or whatever you want to call it. And when you need it, say, hey, I need to take a couple of days off for whatever reason. You don't need to explain. That's how the company needs to give you the trust that if you need something, take it. We have your back. We're going to take care of your work. And when you're ready, come back and do your job. No, so that's how good companies operate. That's culture. It's trusting the people operate under good intentions. And when you trust them, I'm going to give you, an example, but I think it's great for the audience to, you mentioned you want to hear some examples. There's a Australian software company that's called Atlassian, and they offer employees a voucher, a couple of $1,000, I don't know, $4,000 or $5,000 before they actually start on their first day for them to take a vacation. You know that changing jobs is stressful, etc. So they say, you know what? When you finish your previous job, take a couple of days, go somewhere else, relax, and then start. Many companies, you have to show that you're trustworthy after a couple of months to start earning vacations or even health benefit, which is ridiculous. In this case, Atlassian is telling people, you know what, we trust you even before you start working for us, and we're giving you money up front for you to take some days off. What happens? The people that start working in the company, they are so excited. They love the company. So it's not just a nice to have, but the impact that culture creates on people is amazing. It's amazing.
I think European companies often function differently than United States companies as well. Just the thoughts and culture in general of how work and taking time off is viewed differently.
Indeed, but I've seen everything now because I work with Europe and Latin America and a lot, of course, in North America, US and Canada. And there are examples of good and bad everywhere, I can tell you. There are a lot of American companies that are realizing that, hey, we need to care about people. We need to they're not just a machine that we need to maximize their productivity. And actually, when people are in good mental state, good health state, they produce more. So it's productivity. It's not about hours work. It's about mental state, about focusing, to your point, we talk about eliminating noises and interruption before this conversation. Well, that's also important in the workplace. Another quick win. How can you eliminate the interruptions? How you can block time for people to do deep work without having constant emails, Slack messages, meetings, phone calls from their managers, because people cannot operate being constant. Your mind needs to focus. So provide some time in which people can do work without being interrupted. That's another easy fix to improve your culture.
Mm-hmm. We teach calendar blocking basically to help with some of that, because we've had team members before who were just totally stressed out because they felt like they needed to be on everything every minute. And I was like, no, you really don't. We have parameters around that. The metric is to respond, in a timely manner within 24 hours for most things. So, there's no reason why you should feel like you need to respond in 20 minutes. But yeah, I love this conversation. I think the one challenge I would have with the Australian company that you gave the example of is that I think for most small businesses, though, it sounds like a phenomenal idea to give your new people coming in money and resources to go take a vacation. I think for really small business, not necessarily the SBA defined, but like 10 million and under, that's not a reality. I don't think that they can afford it. So what are maybe some other small things they can do to create trust for incoming employees?
I think the example is not to replicate what other people do, but also to inspire in how can I show trust as early as possible. That would be the challenge, and people can define what's the solution depending on their budgets, peculiarities, etc. But one important thing is we talk about flexibility. Of course, for women is critical, but for many other groups as well. And I think that flexibility of schedule, not just only from where they work from, which people 72% of employees expect schedule flexibility. That means that not only I can choose if I work from home some days or whatever, but also that I can manage my working hours. So some people, for family reasons, because they are early risers, they prefer to start working maybe at 6 a.m. and finish earlier. Some people like me were night owls. We like to work later. Yesterday I was facilitating a workshop and finished midnight. And for me, let's do it. So that kind of flexibility doesn't cost money, because in the end, people still work. But it's fantastic from a people standpoint, because you help them. If I have the flexibility that I can go as a mother to take care of my kids because they have an issue without being penalized, then I save the money from having someone to take care of that, of the kid or whatever, and also the stress, so I can focus on my work. So people are going to be extremely grateful for that. and doesn't cost money.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. So Gustavo, so our listeners can stay in touch with you after the show. How would they do that?
The easiest way to find me, it's on LinkedIn. You can look for Gustavo Rossetti, ZZT. I'm the only one there, so that's easy. And if not, you can check our website, fearlessculture.design. It's .design, not .com. And not only you're going to find my contact information there and my company information there, but there's also a lot of articles. We have like over 600 articles, a lot of free tools that you can use to start experimenting with your culture. Free, everything you can download, you can use it. So it's ready for you to do it. And lastly, if you're willing to learn more about culture, I published a couple of months my latest book, which is called Remote Not Distant, which is about building a hybrid culture and thrive in this new workplace. It's an Amazon bestseller, so hopefully you enjoy it. It's really full of not only in interviews, but has a lot of tools and stuff that people can apply right away. It's not theory, it's really practical and includes perspective from large companies, but also from mid-sized companies, small companies, and startups.
Perfect. And I'm on your website right now. So for our listeners, just click on that resource tab and you'll find all of the things he has mentioned, including the Uncover the Sticky Fish. So Gustavo, thank you for your time today.
My pleasure. I really enjoyed it. Thank you, Denise, for the invitation.
Thank you for joining me for today's Nurture Small Business podcast, where the focus is on business growth, technology, and people strategies to help your business thrive. At DCA Virtual Business Support, our focus is making your business operations run smooth so you can focus on growth. Reach out to me at Denise@dcavirtual.com if you'd like to learn more.